She built a $1 billion company from nothing, and they made her stand in a hallway like she was nobody. Avery Collins walked into one of the most prestigious hotels in the city with a meeting to attend and a deal to close. What she got instead was a general manager who smiled to her face and ordered his staff to humiliate her behind her back. Every employee looked through her. Every small cruelty was deliberate. But one person saw her, a janitor, quiet, forgettable, pushing a cart down a marble corridor. Nobody in that hotel knew what he used to be. And before the night was over, they would all find out. If this story already has you hooked, you are exactly where you need to be. Hit that subscribe button right now so you never miss the stories we drop. Every single one hits different. Smash the like button if you want more, and drop a comment telling me your city and country. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let's get into it. The lobby of the Ravenshire Grand Hotel looked the way money looked when it stopped trying to impress people and just existed. Marble floors the color of old cream, chandeliers that hung like frozen waterfalls, staff moving in quiet, choreographed loops that made the whole place feel less like a building and more like a performance. It was the kind of hotel where the air itself seemed to cost something. Avery Collins stepped through the revolving door at 6:47 in the evening and immediately felt the temperature shift from the November cold outside to the warm, curated stillness inside. She had a black wool coat over a charcoal blazer, her laptop bag on one shoulder, a leather portfolio tucked under her arm. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman in the middle of something important who had somewhere to be. She did not look around the lobby the way some people did, gawking at the chandeliers or the flower arrangements that stood 6 feet tall at the center of the room. She had been in places like this before. Better places, honestly. She walked straight to the front desk. There were 3 people working the check-in counter. One of them, a young man with a collar too stiff for his neck, looked up, made eye contact with her, and then looked back down at his computer screen. Avery waited. The man typed something. Then he picked up a phone and murmured something into it that she couldn't catch. Then he set the phone down and typed again. "Excuse me," Avery said. "One moment," the man said without looking up. She gave him the moment. Then another one. Then she said, "I have a reservation under Collins. Avery Collins. I'm here for a meeting with the Hargrove Group. They've booked the Meridian Suite for this evening." The man typed her name in with 2 fingers slowly, like the keyboard had personally done something to offend him. He stared at the screen, frowned slightly, typed again. "I'm not seeing a reservation in that name," he said. "That's not possible," Avery said. My assistant confirmed it this morning. I have the confirmation number." She reached into her portfolio and pulled out a printed sheet, slid it across the counter. The man looked at it, looked at his screen. "I'll need to check with management," he said. "Okay," Avery said. "How long will that take?" "I'm not sure," he said. He picked up the phone again. Avery stood at the counter. Behind her, 2 other guests arrived. A middle-aged couple with matching luggage and what looked like a corporate expense account written all over their clothes. Within 45 seconds, a different staff member materialized from somewhere and began checking them in with a warmth that bordered on theatrical. Avery watched this happen. She turned back to the first man, who was still on the phone, and she kept her face completely neutral. She was 30 years old. She had been underestimated since she was 22, when she started building her company in a 1-bedroom apartment with a laptop that overheated every 40 minutes, and a business plan that 2 banks had already rejected. She had sat across from investors who talked over her. She had walked into boardrooms where men half listened to her pitch while checking their phones. She had learned a long time ago that showing frustration only gave people what they were looking for. So she waited. 8 minutes passed. Then a man appeared from the back corridor, tall, somewhere in his late 40s, with silver at his temples, and the particular kind of confidence that came from a long career in hospitality, where you learn to perform warmth without actually feeling it. His name tag read, Victor Hale, General Manager. "Ms. Collins," he said, extending a hand. His smile was correct in every technical way. "I apologize for the confusion. We're just sorting out the details now." "The confirmation number is right there," Avery said, nodding toward the paper on the counter. "Yes, I see that." He glanced at it briefly. "Unfortunately, there seems to have been a system issue on our end. The Meridian Suite was double booked. We're upgrading another party as a result of our error, and we'll be placing your party in one of our standard conference rooms this evening." Avery looked at him. The Hargrove Group specifically requested the Meridian Suite. It's a client meeting. I understand, Victor said, and I do apologize. These things do happen. They really shouldn't, she said. Not at a hotel like this. Something moved behind Victor Hale's eyes. Just a flicker, quick enough that she almost missed it. It was not embarrassment. It was not concern. It was something else. Something that looked very close to satisfaction. I'll have someone show you to the conference room, he said. Can I get you something while you wait? Water? Coffee? I'd like to see the room first, she said. Of course. He gestured to a younger female staff member. Diane will take you. Diane led Avery down a hallway that got progressively less impressive as they walked. The carpet changed, the lighting dimmed, the artwork on the walls went from original pieces to the kind of prints you could buy in bulk. The conference room at the end was clean and functional, and had the energy of a room that mostly got used for insurance seminars. Avery set her bag down, looked around, pulled out her phone, and called her assistant. The room they put us in, she said when Maya picked up. It's not the suite. It's not even close. The Hargrove people are going to notice. That's insane, Maya said. I have the confirmation. I can call them. I already tried. They said double booking. Avery kept her voice even, but she pressed two fingers against the side of her jaw, a habit she'd had since college, something she did when she was working very hard to stay calm. I'll handle it. Just, if Richard Hargrove calls, tell him we're all set. She hung up. Stood alone in the conference room for a moment. Then she walked back out into the hallway. The man pushing the cleaning cart was coming around the corner from the far end of the corridor. He moved quietly, the way people moved when they'd learned over years that being quiet was easier than being noticed. He was somewhere in his mid-30s, maybe older. It was hard to tell with certainty because there was nothing about him that seemed to invite that kind of attention. Medium height, broad through the shoulders in a way that his uniform didn't quite hide. Dark hair cut close. He had the kind of face that registered as nothing to people who weren't paying attention. Nathan Walker had been working at Ravenshire Grand for 14 months. He knew where every supply closet was, which elevator ran slowest, which guests tipped, and which ones left their towels on the floor and their mess everywhere else. He knew the staff by their habits and their moods. He knew management by the specific ways they moved when something had gone wrong and they were covering it up. He had been watching Victor Hale all evening, not because Nathan was the kind of person who got involved in things. He was, in fact, the kind of person who actively worked to not get involved in things. He had a daughter at home, 7 years old, named Cora, currently being watched by his neighbor, Mrs. Pacheco, until he finished his shift at 11. He had a routine and a small apartment and a life that was deliberately uncomplicated. But he noticed things. That was not something he had chosen. It was just something that happened, the same way his eyes adjusted automatically in low light or his breathing slowed in a loud room. 11 years in the Navy had done things to the way his brain processed information, and stopping that was like trying to stop breathing. You could maybe slow it down, but it never really stopped. He had noticed the way the front desk staff handled the woman in the charcoal blazer. He had been rolling his cart past the lobby when she checked in, and he had caught enough of the exchange to understand the basic shape of it. He had seen Victor go out to handle it himself, which meant Victor had wanted to handle it himself, which meant this wasn't a mistake. Victor Hale did not make the kind of mistakes he couldn't fix in 30 seconds. He was the kind of man who made choices and called them accidents. Nathan pushed his cart around the corner, and the woman was standing in the hallway outside a conference room, looking at her phone with the particular stillness of someone who was holding themselves together through sheer discipline. He would have walked past without a word. That was the plan. Except that she looked up and their eyes met for a second, and she gave him a brief, tired kind of nod that was somehow more honest than anything else he'd seen in this hotel all night. He nodded back, kept walking. He was 20 feet past her when he heard her make a sound. Not a word, more like a sharp breath, something involuntary. And then he heard her say quietly to herself, "Okay, fine." He didn't turn around, but he slowed down just slightly. The Hargrove group arrived at 7:15. Richard Hargrove was 62, silver-haired, the kind of man who had shaken enough hands that handshaking had become an art form for him. He came with 2 associates and the easy authority of someone who had never once waited for a table in his life. He did not say anything when Diane showed them all to the conference room. He was too polished for that. But Avery caught the slight pause when he walked in, the fractional hesitation before he settled into his chair and started talking about the acquisition timeline. The meeting went fine. Avery knew how to run a room even when the room was wrong. She walked them through the numbers, answered the questions that needed answering, redirected the ones that didn't. Richard Hargrove was not the problem. He never had been. 40 minutes in, Hargrove's associate, a younger woman named Priya, who Avery had come to respect over several months of back and forth, leaned over and murmured, "Did something happen with the original booking? Richard mentioned expecting the suite." "System error on the hotel's end," Avery said just as quietly. Priya's expression was carefully neutral. "Mm-hmm," she said, in a way that communicated quite a lot. After the meeting ended and the Hargrove team left, Avery walked to the front desk to ask about adjusting the billing. There was no reason she should pay suite rates for a standard conference room. And that was where things fell apart. The front desk manager she spoke to was polite but unhelpful, in that specific way where every sentence contained an apology and zero actual assistance. He would need to check with management. Management was unavailable. He could take her contact information. Someone would follow up. "I'd like to speak with Victor Hale," Avery said. "Mr. Hale is currently—" "I'll wait," she said. She waited in a chair near the lobby. 15 minutes passed. Then 20. Around the lobby, guests came and went. Staff moved past her. No one checked in to update her. She got up and walked back to the desk. "Has Mr. Hale been notified that I'm waiting?" "Yes, ma'am. Is he in the building?" A slight pause. "Yes, ma'am." "Then please tell him again that I'm here." She went back to the chair, sat down. The marble lobby was busy around her. Doors opening, luggage rolling, small clusters of people in expensive clothes heading to the hotel restaurant or bar. A woman alone in a chair with a laptop bag and a conference folder was nobody in particular. A group of hotel employees passed her. Two of them were talking in voices pitched low, but not low enough. She caught a fragment. "That woman's been here an hour." And then something she couldn't catch, followed by a quiet laugh. She kept her face arranged into something neutral, but something in her chest went tight in a way that had nothing to do with the deal or the room or the billing. It was something older and meaner than that. It was the particular humiliation of being made to feel small in a room full of people who assumed they could afford to. She was still sitting in the chair when Victor Hale finally appeared. He crossed the lobby toward her with a calm that felt performed, and there were two other staff members with him, which struck her immediately as unnecessary. "Miss Collins," he said, "I'm sorry to have kept you." "I'd like to discuss the billing for this evening," she said. "The room we were given was not what was confirmed." "I understand your frustration," Victor said. "Unfortunately, our policy in cases of room substitution—" "I'm not frustrated," Avery said. "I'm asking a straightforward question about a straightforward billing error." Victor's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "Ms. Collins, I've had several other guests raise concerns about your party's conduct this evening. I have to be transparent about that." Avery went very still. "My party's conduct." "The noise level in the conference room," he said. "Other guests on that corridor were disrupted." "We were in a closed-room business meeting for 40 minutes, she said flatly. "There were complaints," Victor said, and his voice carried exactly the right weight of regret to sound credible to anyone listening who didn't know what was actually happening. The lobby was not packed, but it wasn't empty either. There were people at the front desk, a few people near the entrance. Enough. And Victor knew it. He had chosen this spot on purpose. Avery stood up. She was not particularly tall, but she had spent years making sure that did not matter. "I want those complaints documented," she said. "In writing, names, times, and room numbers. Tonight. Our guest information is confidential." "Then you don't have any," she said. Silence. The two staff members behind Victor were looking at their shoes. Someone near the front desk had stopped what they were doing. And then a sound. The low squeak of wheels on marble. And Nathan Walker came around the corner from the east corridor, pushing his cart, and stopped about 12 feet away. He had not meant to come back to the lobby. He had been heading for the service elevator. But the route took him past the main floor, and he had heard the particular quality of quiet that a confrontation created in a public space, a held-breath silence that he recognized from very different contexts. He stopped. Victor glanced at him. The glance was automatic and dismissive, the way you'd look at a chair. Nathan looked at Avery. She was standing straight, jaw set, and there was nothing broken about her. She was holding herself with a kind of composure that required real effort. But something in her eyes, just for a moment, looked profoundly tired. Nathan set the brake on his cart. Victor was saying something about the hotel's rights to refuse further service to disruptive guests. An absurd statement, one that landed like a slap given that she hadn't done anything. And Avery's expression was tightening in a way that had moved past composure into something closer to pain. "Excuse me," Nathan said. His voice was not loud. It was never loud, but it had a quality to it that made people stop. Something level and unhurried, like someone who had learned from hard experience that volume was a crutch. Victor turned. The dismissiveness was instant and complete. "This is a private matter. Please continue your—" "I heard you say there were complaints," Nathan said, "about a disruptive guest." He looked at Avery, then back at Victor. "I've been on this floor all evening, East Corridor, then the lobby, then the crane room, then back." He paused. "There were no complaints from anyone on this floor." Victor stared at him. "Excuse, I'm just saying what I know," Nathan said, "since you mentioned complaints." The lobby was very quiet. "You're going to want to be careful," Victor said, and his voice had dropped into something that was meant to communicate consequence. Nathan looked at him for a moment. He had the steady, unhurried quality of a man who had been threatened by people who were much better at it than Victor Hale. "I'm just telling you what I observed," he said. "I'm good at that." Victor held Nathan's gaze for a few seconds. Then he looked at Avery. "We can continue this conversation in my office," he said, and the offer sounded like a retreat, even though it wasn't phrased as one. "No," Avery said. "I'll expect the itemized billing adjustment by tomorrow morning, and I'll be documenting this conversation myself." She picked up her portfolio. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Hale." She turned and walked toward the exit. Nathan reached down and released the brake on his cart. He was already moving back toward the service corridor when he heard her footsteps pause. He didn't stop. "Hey," she said. He looked back. She was standing 10 feet away, and she looked at him with the expression of someone trying to figure out what just happened. "Thank you," she said. It wasn't a grand moment. She didn't say it like he had saved her. She said it like someone who had spent an entire evening being looked through and had just noticed that someone, for once, had looked directly at her. Nathan nodded. "Have a good night," he said. He pushed his cart around the corner and out of sight. Behind him, the lobby returned to its usual performance, smooth and warm and carefully arranged, the way beautiful rooms always were when the ugliness was being kept somewhere you couldn't quite see it. But the ugliness was there, and it was not finished. Nathan Walker did not think about the lobby incident on his drive home. He thought about it a little. That was the honest version. He thought about the way Victor Hale had positioned himself, two staff behind him, public setting, manufactured complaints about noise. That was not a man making a mistake. That was a man who had done this kind of thing before and knew which details to get right. The part that stayed with Nathan was not the confrontation itself. It was the moment just before it, when he had come around the corner and seen Avery Collins standing alone in that lobby, surrounded by people, completely isolated, and had recognized the specific quality of that aloneness. He had been in rooms full of people who wanted him to disappear. He knew what it looked like from the inside. He pulled into his apartment complex at 11:40, sat in the car for a moment with the engine off, and then went upstairs. Mrs. Pacheco had fallen asleep on his couch with the television on, which happened at least twice a week. He turned the volume down, checked on Cora, and then stood in the doorway of his daughter's room for a moment in the dark. She was 7 and slept like she was angry at the mattress, sprawled sideways with one arm hanging off the edge. He moved the arm back onto the bed. She didn't wake up. He stood there a few more seconds than he needed to, then went to the kitchen and drank a glass of water standing at the sink. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost let it go, then answered. "Is this Nathan Walker?" A woman's voice, measured, tired, with the slight roughness of someone who had been talking in careful, controlled tones all evening, and was starting to run low on the energy required. "Who's asking?" he said. "Avery Collins. I got your name from the staff directory. I realize this is strange. I'm still at the hotel." Nathan set the glass down. "It's almost midnight." "I know." A pause. I need to talk to someone, and right now you're the only person I've seen tonight who didn't have an angle. He looked at the ceiling. Cora's room was above the kitchen, and he could hear the faint creak of her shifting in bed. Ms. Collins. Avery, she said. Avery, whatever happened in that lobby, I just said what I saw. That's all it was. I know, she said. That's why I'm calling you and not hotel management. Another pause, longer this time. Something's wrong here. I mean, beyond what happened earlier. I went back to the conference room to collect something I left, and the lock had been changed. My personal portfolio, the leather one I had with me, it's missing. I had documents in there, sensitive ones. Nathan was quiet for a moment. Have you called the police? I called the front desk. They told me the room had been cleaned and any items left behind would be in lost and found. There was nothing in lost and found. Her voice was careful, but underneath it there was something taut. The room was cleaned 40 minutes after my meeting ended. I was still in the building. Nobody told me. And the lock code was changed. What kind of documents? He asked. A beat. The kind that would be very useful to someone trying to disrupt a corporate acquisition before it closes. Nathan turned and looked at his kitchen counter. His keys were there, and his wallet, and a drawing Cora had made at school. A green horse with too many legs, labeled whores in purple crayon. He looked at it for a second. I can be there in 20 minutes, he said. You don't have to. I know, he said. He left a note for Mrs. Pacheco and drove back through the November streets with the heat on low and the radio off. He did not know exactly what he was walking back into. He had a general sense of it, the shape of it, the way you could feel the weight of a situation before you understood all its parts. And the general sense told him that this was more than a general manager with a personal grudge. Victor Hale had been too smooth about it, too prepared. The staff behind him, the manufactured complaints, the timing. It had the feel of something planned in advance, which meant the plan had a purpose beyond simple humiliation. Humiliation was usually a byproduct, rarely a goal on its own. He parked in the staff lot and used his employee keycard to enter through the service entrance. The hotel was quieter now, late-night quiet, the kind of stillness that settled into large buildings after midnight when most of the guests had retreated to their rooms, and the performance of the place was on pause. Avery was waiting near the east corridor in the same spot where he had heard the confrontation earlier. She had her coat on now, her phone in one hand, and she looked like a woman who had been running on discipline for the past several hours and was starting to feel the cost of it. There were shadows under her eyes that hadn't been there at 7 o'clock, or maybe they had, and he hadn't been close enough to notice. Thank you for coming back, she said. Show me the room, he said. The conference room was at the end of the corridor. The keypad on the door showed a different light pattern than it had earlier. Nathan had done enough building security work in his first months at Ravenshire to know what a recently changed code looked like. He tried his master staff key. It worked on basic locks but not on the conference room doors, which ran on a separate system managed by the front desk. He crouched and looked at the bottom edge of the door. There was a faint scuff mark on the floor near the threshold. Fresh, the kind left by someone moving something across polished stone in a hurry. Walk me through the meeting, he said. Where did you have the portfolio? On the table to my right, Avery said. I pulled documents from it twice during the meeting, then closed it. When we finished, Richard Hargrove and his team left first. I spent maybe 3 minutes collecting the stuff on the table. The portfolio was there when I went to the lobby. And you were in the lobby from when to when? 7:55 to about 9:15, she said, waiting for Victor. That's an 80-minute window, Nathan said, standing up. More than enough. Enough for what? He looked at her. Someone knew you'd be stuck waiting. That part wasn't random. He made you wait on purpose. While you were in the lobby, someone had access to this room. Avery was quiet for a moment. Victor, she said, or someone working with him. Nathan looked down the corridor. There was a camera at the far end, angled toward the main hallway junction. But the corridor itself, between the junction and the conference room, had a blind spot. He knew exactly where it was. He had been the one who pointed it out to facilities management 4 months ago and been told it was on the maintenance schedule. Nothing was ever on the maintenance schedule. I need to see the security footage for this corridor, he said. They won't show me that, Avery said. I already asked. They said only management can authorize it. I'm not asking management, Nathan said. She looked at him. You have access to the system? I know a few things about how the building works, he said. It wasn't a complete answer. She seemed to decide it was enough. The security office was in the basement, down a corridor that smelled like cleaning solution and recycled air. Nathan had been down here exactly twice, once during his first week when a supervisor had given him the staff orientation tour, and once 3 months ago when he had helped search for a missing guest item and the security guard on duty had been willing to pull camera footage. The guard tonight was a man named Drew, mid-50s, who had worked at Ravenshire long enough to have strong opinions about the coffee machine and not much else. Nathan knocked on the open door. Drew looked up from a monitor. "Hey," Nathan said. "Working late." "Aren't we all?" Drew said. He looked past Nathan and saw Avery. His expression shifted into something more formal. "I'm Avery Collins," she said. "I had a meeting here this evening. I believe some personal items may have been taken from the conference room on the East Corridor, and I'm hoping you might be able to help us look at the camera footage from that area, between 8 and 9:15 tonight." Drew leaned back. That kind of request usually goes through Mr. Hale. "I understand," Avery said, "but the items that are missing are confidential business documents, and I have some reason to think this situation may involve the hotel's management." She held his gaze. "I'm not asking you to do anything improper. I'm asking you to pull up footage from a hallway camera. You can watch it with us." Drew looked at Nathan. Nathan gave him nothing. No pressure, no expression. Just waited. Drew looked at Avery again. Then he turned to his keyboard and pulled up the system. "East Corridor," he said. 8 to 9:15. The footage was grainy, time-stamped, black and white. At 8:22, a figure came down the corridor from the main junction. Male, hotel uniform, carrying what looked like a small bag or case. He stopped at the conference room door. Spent less than 30 seconds there. Left. "Can you zoom in on that?" Nathan said. Drew zoomed. The figure's face was partially turned away from the camera, but the build was identifiable. Tall, slightly heavy through the middle, and on the man's collar, just visible for 2 frames before he turned away, a small silver pin, the kind managers wore at Ravenshire. Avery said nothing for several seconds. Then she said, very quietly, "I need a copy of this." "I can't release footage without—" "Drew," Nathan said. The man looked at him. This woman's business documents were stolen from inside this building. The footage shows someone entering a room she had reserved. Whatever chain of command applies here, this footage is evidence. If something happens to it before it gets to people who can act on it, that's a problem you don't want to own. Drew stared at him for a moment. Something shifted in the older man's expression. Not fear exactly, more like the feeling of a decision arriving that he'd known was coming and hadn't figured out how to avoid. He opened a drawer, pulled out a flash drive, and plugged it in. "I'm going to need to log this," he said. "Log it," Nathan said. They sat in the hotel's small staff break room on the second floor at 12:45 in the morning, because it was the one place in the building Nathan knew had no cameras. Avery had the flash drive in her coat pocket and her phone face up on the table. Nathan had a cup of coffee he wasn't really drinking. "Okay," Avery said. She was holding herself in a way that suggested the adrenaline of the last few hours was starting to metabolize into exhaustion. "Walk me through what you think is happening." "I think Victor Hale had a reason to want you distracted tonight," Nathan said. "Not just annoyed, actually distracted, out of that room for a long stretch of time, which means he knew about the documents, knew what was in them, and knew when to move." "The acquisition," she said. "It closes in 11 days. If someone has the preliminary terms and the structural documents, the subsidiary agreements, they could use that to build a counterposition, or leak it to a competing party. Or hold it," Nathan said. "Use it as leverage." Avery looked at him. "You know what leverage means in a corporate acquisition context." "I know what leverage means," he said, without elaborating. She watched him for a second, the way people sometimes did when they were trying to solve a puzzle, and suspected the piece they needed was right in front of them. He didn't feel like being solved right now, so he moved past it. "How many people knew you'd be here tonight?" he asked. "My assistant, the Hargrove team. Whoever was CC'd on the booking confirmation." She paused. "Victor would have seen the reservation when it was made. He's the general manager. He would have known which room and who the meeting was with." "Does Victor Hale have any prior connection to your industry, to your competitors?" "Not that I know of." She pulled out her phone and started typing something. But that's not hard to hide. Nathan drank some coffee. It was bad coffee, the kind that tasted like it had been sitting in the pot since the previous shift, but it was hot. He thought about Cora asleep sideways in her bed, and Mrs. Pacheco on the couch, and the drawing with the green horse. He thought about the clean, deliberate life he had built for himself over the past 4 years, and the way he had just walked directly back into the opposite of that. "Why are you here?" Avery said. He looked at her. "What?" "You came back at midnight. You didn't have to do that." She wasn't being confrontational about it. Her voice was genuinely curious, careful. "You barely know me. You said 2 sentences to me in the lobby, and then you walked away, but you came back." He was quiet for a moment. "You called," he said. "Plenty of people call strangers at midnight. Doesn't mean the strangers show up." He set the cup down. "I noticed some things tonight before I talked to you in the lobby. The way Victor managed that situation, where he chose to do it, who he brought with him, the timing. It wasn't a guy blowing off steam at a guest he didn't like. It was something more organized than that." He paused. "I don't like organized cruelty. Never have." Avery looked at him for a moment. She seemed to be deciding whether to push further, then decided not to. "Okay," she said. "So what do we do now?" "You need to get out of this building," Nathan said. "Tonight. Don't go back to the room if you have one here. The flash drive goes with you. First thing tomorrow, you give it to your legal team. Not the police. Your legal team first. Because what's on it is also evidence of where those documents went, and you need to control that before anyone else does." "And Victor?" "Victor's going to figure out the footage is gone when he checks in the morning," Nathan said, "which gives you about 8 hours." Avery nodded slowly. She was quiet for a moment, and in the quiet, Nathan heard the building around them. The hum of climate systems, the distant sound of an elevator, the particular alive-dead quality of a large structure in the middle of the night. He had worked enough nights in this building that its sounds were familiar to him in a way he hadn't intended. He had not meant to know this building well. He had not meant to know any place well. Knowing places was what happened when you stopped moving, and stopping had taken deliberate effort, and he still didn't entirely trust himself to have done it right. "Can I ask you something?" Avery said. "You can ask," he said. "How do you know about camera blind spots and security systems? And—" She gestured slightly, a vague motion that seemed to encompass the last 2 hours in general. "You're a janitor. I don't mean that dismissively. I mean, you don't move like someone who only knows how to clean floors." Nathan looked at her. "What do I move like?" She thought about it. "Like someone who's used to making quick assessments, like someone who looks at a room and immediately knows the exits." "That's useful in a lot of jobs," he said. "Nathan." He looked at her directly. She was tired, and she was smart, and she had just spent 4 hours being systematically undermined by a man who had planned it out in advance, and she was still sitting here at 12:45 in the morning trying to understand exactly what was happening around her. There was something admirable about that, in a way that had nothing to do with her being a CEO or running a company. "I was in the military," he said, "for a long time. I don't talk about it much." "What branch?" "Navy," he said. She nodded slowly. She seemed to sense that this was the version of the answer he was comfortable giving, and she didn't push for the rest of it. He appreciated that more than he would have said out loud. "Okay," she said. She stood up, put her phone in her pocket, checked that the flash drive was still there. "I'm going to go get a hotel somewhere else tonight. Something that's not this hotel." "Good plan," Nathan said. "Will you—" She stopped. Tried again. "Is there any chance I can reach you tomorrow? If the legal team has questions about what you saw?" He thought about it. He thought about Cora, who had a school thing at 9 and needed him to braid her hair first because she refused to go with it down. And he was still not very good at braiding, but he was getting better. He thought about the deliberate small life he had been building for 4 years, one uneventful shift at a time. "Yeah," he said. "You can reach me." He gave her his number. She saved it without commenting on the fact that she already had it, which meant she had found it through the staff directory, which meant she had made more effort than a simple call required. He noted that, but didn't say anything about it. They walked back through the building toward the main exit. The lobby was nearly empty now. Just a single night staff member at the front desk, and a man in a dark coat sitting near the far wall with a newspaper folded on his knee, not reading it. Nathan caught the man in his peripheral vision and moved past without adjusting his pace, but his mind registered it cleanly and filed it away. The angle of the man's posture, the too deliberate stillness, the newspaper that hadn't been touched, the kind of thing that was invisible unless you were calibrated to see it. He held the door for Avery. She stepped out into the November cold. "Thank you," she said. She said it the same way she had in the lobby earlier. Not overly, not dramatically, just directly. Like someone who meant it and didn't need it to be more than it was. "Be careful," Nathan said. She pulled her coat tighter and walked toward the taxi stand. He watched until she was in a cab, then turned and went back inside. He had 2 hours left on his shift. He got his cart, went back to the East Corridor, and resumed what he had been doing before any of this started. The marble floors needed attention near the conference room junction. There was a smudge on the baseboard that he had been meaning to get to since Tuesday. He worked steadily, quietly, the way he always did. But part of his mind was still on the man in the lobby with the folded newspaper, and the way the man had not looked up when Avery walked past him toward the door, because someone who wasn't paying attention would have looked up. It was a natural thing. Motion draws the eye. Only someone who was already watching would know to look away. Nathan finished the baseboard, moved to the next section, kept working. Outside, the city ran on through the night, indifferent and ordinary, and inside the Ravenshire Grand, the beautiful lobby hummed with its artificial warmth. And somewhere in the hotel, a man named Victor Hale was either sleeping or not sleeping, and Nathan Walker pushed his cart through the corridor and thought about all the things that ordinary nights could quietly contain. Avery did not sleep well. She had checked into a smaller hotel 6 blocks from the Ravenshire, a clean, unremarkable place where nobody knew her name, and the front desk clerk barely looked up when she paid cash for the room. She had sat on the edge of the bed with her coat still on and gone through everything she could remember about the documents in that portfolio. Preliminary acquisition terms, the subsidiary breakdown, 3 pages of due diligence notes with her handwriting in the margins. Nothing that would destroy the deal on its own, but enough, in the right hands, at the right moment, to create serious problems. Enough to give someone a roadmap. She had called her lawyer at 1 in the morning. Daniel Cho had been her legal counsel since the company was 2 years old, and he had the quality she valued most in anyone she worked with, which was that he did not waste time on reactions. She told him what happened. He asked 4 questions. He told her to sit on the flash drive, document everything she remembered in writing before she slept, and be in his office at 8. She wrote for an hour. Then she lay down without undressing and stared at the ceiling and thought about the man in the newspaper in the lobby. Because she had seen him too, just briefly, in the way you notice something without knowing why. And it was only now, in the quiet of the room, that she understood what had bothered her about it. He had been sitting in a spot with a direct sightline to the main exit. She called Nathan at 7:15. "The man in the lobby," she said when he picked up. "The one near the east wall, with the newspaper." A pause. "You saw him." "I saw him when we walked out. I didn't think about it until an hour ago. He wasn't a guest. I've been here 6 hours and I can't stop thinking about it." "He was there when I went back in," Nathan said. His voice was the same as it had been the night before, level, unhurried, like a man who had already processed most of what was worth processing. "Gone by 3. He used the side exit off the crane room corridor." "You watched him." "I work nights," he said. "I notice things." Avery sat up. "Nathan, if Victor had someone watching the hotel, watching me, then this is more than a stolen portfolio. This is coordinated." "Yeah," he said. "I know." "Do you have any idea who Victor might be working with?" "I have some thoughts," he said. "Nothing solid. Give me today." She wanted to push for more. She didn't. "I'm meeting my lawyer at 8. I'll have more information by this afternoon." "Be careful what you say on the phone," Nathan said. "And check your laptop. If they went through the portfolio, they may have had access to your bag." She looked across the room at her laptop bag sitting on the chair. She had not thought about the laptop. "What am I checking for?" "Whether anyone opened it. Whether the physical position of things inside is the way you left them." A pause. "It's not a perfect method, but it's a start." After she hung up, she went through the bag carefully. Everything looked the same, except the small side pocket where she kept her charging cable had been zipped closed. She never zipped that pocket. It was a small thing. It might have been nothing. But she had developed her company by treating small things seriously, and she was not about to stop now. She opened the laptop, checked the recent activity log. Nothing unusual on the surface. But she was not a forensics expert, and she knew that people who knew what they were doing did not leave surface traces. She packed up, went to Daniel Cho's office, and started the day. Daniel watched the footage twice. He was a compact, meticulous man in his late 40s who had the habit of completely stillness when he was thinking. He would just stop, hands flat on the desk, and process. He did this for about 45 seconds after the second viewing. "The pin on the collar," he said. "Management staff," Avery said. "I confirmed it with Nathan. It's the same style Victor's team wears." "Nathan Walker," Daniel said. "The hotel employee." "Yes." "And he's willing to speak to what he saw?" "He said so." Daniel was quiet again. "The footage alone establishes that someone from hotel management entered a room under your reservation after your meeting ended. Combined with your written account of the interaction with Hale, the delay at check-in, the room substitution, and the timeline, we have enough to file a civil complaint and trigger a formal investigation." He looked at her. "But the bigger question is motive. Why does a hotel general manager want access to your acquisition documents?" "I've been thinking about that since 1 in the morning, Avery said. "Victor Hale tried to get a vendor partnership through my company 8 months ago. We turned it down. The vendor was a facilities services company, Connex Group. The proposal came through an intermediary, not directly, and it didn't meet our standards for vendor due diligence. We declined." "Connex Group," Daniel said, writing it down. "And the connection to Hale?" "I don't have that confirmed yet, but the timing of the original approach, and the way this was structured, it feels like something personal, not just opportunistic." Daniel nodded. "I'll have my investigator run Hale and Connex. If there's a financial connection we can document that changes the character of everything that happened last night from harassment to corporate espionage." He looked at her steadily. "Avery, this could get complicated." "It's already complicated," she said. "More complicated," he said. "If someone wanted those documents to affect the Hargrove acquisition, they may not be finished. 11 days is still enough time to cause problems if the right information reaches the right people." She had known this. Hearing it said out loud in a quiet law office in the morning didn't make it simpler. "What do I do about the acquisition timeline?" "Don't change it," Daniel said. "Don't signal anything to Hargrove yet. If whoever is behind this realizes we know about the theft, they may move faster or shift strategy. We need a few days." Avery drove back through the city with the heat on and the radio off, the same way Nathan had the night before. Though she didn't know that. She sat at a red light and thought about 11 days, and about the deal that had taken her 2 years to build toward, and about a hotel lobby where she had stood alone for 20 minutes waiting for a man who was buying time while someone went through her things. She thought about the fact that she had told herself she could handle everything alone. She had believed it for a long time. Maybe she still believed it, but last night had introduced the complication of someone who had shown up at midnight without being asked, and had not once made her feel like she owed him for it. That was a different kind of thing. She wasn't entirely sure what to do with it yet. Nathan spent the morning at home. Cora's school event was a fall reading celebration, which involved the children sitting in a semicircle while parents signed copies of books the class had read together. He sat in a small plastic chair that was designed for a 7-year-old and listened to his daughter explain the plot of a book about a rabbit who wanted to be a baker. And he asked questions about the rabbit with complete seriousness, because Cora expected that, and because the rabbit's problems were, when you thought about them, genuinely interesting. After, they went to the diner 2 blocks from school, and Cora had pancakes, and he had coffee, and she told him about a girl in her class named Priscilla who had apparently done something during art that was either very funny or very upsetting, the account shifting between the two with each retelling. He watched her talk. She had her mother's eyes, his ex-wife, Renee, who lived in Portland now and called Cora on Sundays, and had, over the past 4 years, built her own life the same way Nathan had built his. They were better at being apart than they had ever been at being together, which was a sad thing and also simply true. Cora was the part they had gotten right. He held on to that without sentiment. After he dropped her at school for the afternoon session, he drove to a library 2 miles from his apartment and sat at a computer terminal and spent 90 minutes running searches on Connex Group, Victor Hale, and the Ravenshire Grand Hotel's corporate ownership structure. What he found was not proof of anything, but it was a shape, Connex Group had a parent company, a holding entity called Meridian Capital Partners, which held positions in a range of hospitality and facilities businesses across the eastern seaboard. The Ravenshire Grand was managed under a licensing agreement with a hotel brand, but the physical property was owned by a real estate trust, whose principal investor, buried under 2 layers of LLC structure, was Meridian Capital Partners. Connex and Ravenshire were in the same financial family. Victor Hale was not acting alone or out of personal grievance. He was acting as an employee of an organization that had a direct stake in disrupting Avery Collins's company before a deal closed, because if Avery's acquisition went through, the acquiring entity would bring its own vendor relationships, and Connex would lose the facilities contract it currently held with the target company. It was not a complicated motive. Most motives weren't when you dug far enough. People did things for money and for the fear of losing money, and everything else was window dressing. He called Avery from the parking lot. She picked up on the second ring. "I was about to call you," she said. "Connex Group," he said. A pause. "My lawyer found the same thing 20 minutes ago." "Meridian Capital Partners owns the hotel," Nathan said, "or the property under it. Connex is in the same portfolio." "Which means Victor Hale is not freelancing," Avery said. "He's executing on behalf of the parent company." She was quiet for a second. "They're going to try again." "If they haven't already," Nathan said. "Is your laptop clean?" "I had an IT security person look at it this morning. They found a tracking pixel installed in a PDF that was in my bag. If I had opened that file on the hotel network, they would have had remote access to the machine." Nathan looked out through the windshield at the parking lot. A woman was loading groceries into a car. 2 kids were arguing over something near the cart return. Everything ordinary and unhurried. "Did you open it?" he asked. "No, I had the PDF, but I didn't open it last night. It was in the portfolio they took, which means they may have taken it partly because they couldn't get me to open the file." She paused. "Or they wanted both, the physical documents and the access attempt. Belt and suspenders." "How many people in your company know the full terms of the acquisition?" "3, she said. "Me, my CFO, and Daniel." "Keep it that way." He thought for a moment. "Avery, they're going to need to do something in the next 48 to 72 hours if they want to impact the deal timeline. The closer it gets to close, the less value any leaked information has. Whatever they're planning, they'll move soon." She was quiet long enough that he could hear the ambient sound of wherever she was. Traffic, faintly, and someone talking in the background. "You sound like someone who's planned time-sensitive operations before," she said. "I've thought about problems before," he said carefully. Another pause. "I need to go back to the hotel." "No, you don't," Nathan said immediately. "Yes, I do," she said. "The conference room. Daniel thinks there may be a second set of documents I left in the table drawer. I sometimes use the drawer for papers I'm not actively referencing during a meeting. I didn't check it because I thought everything was in the portfolio." A beat. "If those papers are still there, I need them back. If they're not still there, I need to know that too." Nathan rubbed his jaw. "Going back in there is—" "I know what it is," she said. "I'm going anyway. I just thought you might want to know." He closed his eyes for a second, opened them. "What time?" 6, she said. "Before Victor's evening shift starts. He comes in at 7. "I'll be there at 5:30, Nathan said. "I'm on shift tonight anyway." He started the car and drove home. He had 4 hours before he needed to be back at Ravenshire. He used part of it to take a nap, a real one, 40 minutes, the way he had learned to sleep in small, efficient windows, and the rest of it to sit at his kitchen table and think carefully about the layout of the hotel's east wing, the service passages, the secondary stairwells, the camera positions and the angles and the blind spots, including the one he had flagged months ago that maintenance had never addressed. He thought about the man with the newspaper and the side exit off the crane room corridor. Whoever had sent him knew enough about the building to know that exit existed. That was not knowledge a random contractor would have. That was internal. Victor Hale had people inside the building who were not Victor Hale. Nathan thought about that for a while. Then he thought about the configuration of the East Corridor and the most efficient routes through it, and the location of every working camera between the main lobby and the conference room. Old habits. He had spent years trying to stop having them, and then a woman in a charcoal blazer had called him at midnight, And now here he was, sitting at a kitchen table covered in Cora's drawings, quietly planning a route through a hotel he cleaned for a living. He looked at the green horse with the too many legs. Yeah, he said, to nobody in particular. Then he got up, made a sandwich, and started getting ready for work. Well, the Ravenshire Grand looked the same as always from the outside. It always would, Nathan thought. Places like this were designed to absorb whatever happened inside them without showing it on the surface. The revolving door turned, the lobby gleamed, the staff smiled on cue. He clocked in at 5:20, got his cart from the supply room, exchanged 12 words with the departing afternoon crew, moved into the East Corridor with the particular unhurried pace he had refined over 14 months, the pace that made him invisible. Avery arrived at 5:55. He knew because he had a sightline to the main entrance from his position near the corridor junction, and he had positioned himself there deliberately. He watched her come through the revolving door in a different coat than yesterday, dark green, longer, with her laptop bag and a look of controlled purpose that he was starting to recognize as her working expression. She saw him immediately, walked toward the corridor without stopping at the front desk. The desk staff might flag you, he said quietly when she reached him. Let them, she said. I'm a guest who had a reservation and a confirmed meeting yesterday. I'm entitled to retrieve my property. Victor's not in yet, but there are people here who work for him. I know, she said. How long do we have? The shift supervisor on right now is a woman named Karen. She's fair. She won't make trouble without a reason. He paused. But there's a man named Garrett who covers the East Corridor in the evenings. He started here 4 months ago. I don't know him well, but I've watched him work, and he doesn't behave like the other staff. Avery looked at him. Meaning? Meaning he watches things he has no reason to watch, Nathan said. He knows where all the cameras are. New staff don't usually know that. She absorbed this. Let's be fast. They moved down the East Corridor. The conference room door was closed. Nathan tried the master key, still on the modified lock that had been changed the night before. He crouched and looked at the keypad. I can call Karen and tell her a guest needs access to retrieve property from a reserved room, he said. Do it, Avery said. He stepped away and made the call. Karen arrived in 4 minutes. A compact woman in her 50s with reading glasses on a chain and an expression that had seen enough hotel drama to be permanently unimpressed by it. Ms. Collins, she said, looking at Avery, you had the meeting in here yesterday evening? I did. I need to check the table drawer for documents I may have left. Karen looked at the keypad. The code was updated last night. I'll need to check the authorization log for who changed it. She pulled out a tablet and scrolled for a moment. Her expression shifted almost imperceptibly. It was changed at 9:47 p.m. Authorization code is Mr. Hales. The room went quiet for a moment in a way that was different from ordinary quiet. Can you open it? Avery asked. Karen looked at her tablet, looked at the door. I can open it, she said, with the deliberate evenness of someone who had just privately made a decision. She typed in a supervisor override. The lock clicked. The conference room looked the same as it had during the meeting. Table, chairs, the projection screen at the far end that they hadn't used. Avery went directly to the right side of the table, pulled open the built-in drawer. Empty. She stood there looking at the empty drawer for a moment, not with surprise, more with the expression of someone who had half expected this and was still absorbing the confirmation of it. They were there, she said. I put them there about 15 minutes into the meeting because I wasn't referencing them and the table was getting cluttered. What were they? Karen said. She had come to stand in the doorway, and her voice had shifted into something quieter, more careful. Preliminary terms for a business transaction, Avery said. Confidential. Karen looked at the empty drawer. I'm going to need to document this, she said. A guest reporting property missing from a secured room. That's a formal report. That's exactly what I want, Avery said. Nathan had moved to the far corner of the room while they talked. He was looking at something near the baseboard, a mark, almost invisible against the dark wood panel, that looked like it had been made by the edge of a piece of furniture moved in a hurry. He looked at the table, looked at the angle of the scuff. Avery, he said quietly. She came to where he was standing. He pointed at the mark without touching it. She looked at it, looked back at the table. Someone moved the table, she said. Recently, he said. This morning, maybe. To get to the drawer from a position that wasn't in front of it. He looked up at the camera in the upper corner of the room. The conference rooms had interior cameras, mostly for security during events. There's footage of this room. Karen had heard this. She was already back on her tablet. Nathan watched her face as she pulled up the log, and he watched the moment when something in her expression changed. A small tightening around the eyes, a held breath. The interior camera for this room was disabled, she said. Last night at 9:51, 4 minutes after the lock was changed. Nobody said anything for a moment. Then Nathan heard it. A sound from the corridor outside, the specific sound of footsteps moving with purpose rather than the casual gait of hotel staff going about their shift. He put a hand on Avery's arm. She went still. Karen looked up. The door opened. Garrett was a man in his mid-30s, dark-haired, with the build of someone who had once been athletic and had kept just enough of it. He was wearing the standard hotel uniform, but he stood in the doorway with a stillness that was different from Karen's professional calm. It was the stillness of someone assessing variables. "Karen," he said, "Mr. Hale wanted me to check in on the East Corridor." "Mr. Hale's not on shift yet," Karen said. "He called in," Garrett said. His eyes moved to Avery, then to Nathan. They lingered on Nathan for half a second longer than was natural. "Ms. Collins, I wasn't aware you were still a guest of the hotel." "I'm retrieving my property," Avery said. Her voice was steady. "Of course," Garrett said. He smiled. It was a correct smile. "I just wanted to make sure everything was in order." "Everything is being documented," Karen said. She met Garrett's eyes directly. "Formally." Something passed between them, a current of unspoken information, and then Garrett nodded once. "Of course," he said again. "I'll let Mr. Hale know." He left. Nathan listened to the footsteps recede down the corridor, tracking them by sound past the junction and toward the service wing. He counted to 8. "He's going to make a call," Nathan said, "and then Victor Hale is going to be in this building a lot earlier than 7 o'clock. Karen looked at him. For the first time, she looked at him. Not as a janitor she knew by first name, but as something she couldn't quite categorize. "How long do you think we have?" she asked, and it struck him that she was asking the question as if his answer was the one that mattered. 40 minutes, he said. "Maybe less." Karen straightened. "Then let me tell you something," she said. She looked at Avery, then back at Nathan. "The employee that was let go 2 months ago, a man named Frank DeLuca. 22 years with this hotel. Victor fired him for misappropriating hotel property, said Frank had been taking supplies." She paused. "Frank did not take anything. I know that because I was the one who did the inventory, and the numbers Victor cited were wrong. I reported the discrepancy to the regional HR office. Nothing happened." She folded her hands in front of her. "I have been waiting for 2 months for someone to ask me the right questions." Avery looked at her steadily. "Tell me about Frank DeLuca." "Frank found something," Karen said. "He told me about 3 weeks before he was fired that he had seen something he shouldn't have. Papers in the management office that didn't belong there. Financial records that had nothing to do with the hotel. He didn't know what they were, but he made a copy." She paused. "I don't know if he still has it. He moved to his daughter's place in New Jersey after the firing." Nathan pulled out his phone and opened the Notes app. "Last name DeLuca. First name Frank. Do you have a contact?" Karen reached into the pocket of her blazer and produced a small card. The kind you got printed at a copy shop, simple white stock. She held it out to Nathan. He took it. "I've been carrying that for 2 months," Karen said, "in case the right moment came." Nathan looked at the card. Then he looked at Avery. She was already doing the calculation. He could see it in her face, the way her eyes moved slightly to the left, the way people's did when they were running a sequence forward in their head. Frank DeLuca plus the footage Drew had copied, plus the empty drawer, plus Karen's testimony, plus Meridian Capital Partners. Each piece on its own was suggestive. Together, they were beginning to be something harder. "I need to get out of this building," Avery said. Again. "Karen," Nathan said, "is there a service exit on the south side that doesn't route through the main lobby?" "End of the housekeeping corridor," Karen said. "Keypad code is 4772. It puts you out on the side street." "Thank you," Nathan said. Karen nodded. She looked at him for a moment with the expression of someone who had just confirmed something she had been quietly wondering about for a while. Then she looked back at her tablet and began typing her formal incident report with the methodical focus of a woman who knew exactly what she was doing and intended to have it documented before anyone could stop her. Nathan walked with Avery through the service corridor. It was narrower back here, fluorescent lit, the functional skeleton of the hotel that guests never saw. Laundry carts, supply shelves, the industrial hum of machinery doing the invisible work that kept the surfaces above beautiful. Their footsteps were the only sound besides the machinery. "She's been waiting for someone to come," Avery said quietly. "Yeah," Nathan said. "How many other people in that hotel are waiting for the same thing?" He thought about it. About 14 months of shifts, of faces he knew by habit, of small injustices he had noticed and filed away and not acted on because acting on things had not been part of his plan. "More than Victor thinks," he said. They reached the south exit. Nathan typed the code. The door opened onto the side street. Dark now, cold, the kind of November evening that felt like it had been going on for days. Avery stopped at the threshold. She turned and looked at him, and in the flat light of the corridor, she looked like someone who had been through 2 hard days and was only just now registering the accumulated weight of them. "Nathan," she said, "what Frank DeLuca found, if it connects Victor to Meridian Capital Partners directly, this stops being a civil matter." "I know," he said. "It becomes criminal," she said. "Conspiracy to commit corporate fraud, theft, possibly more depending on how far up the chain it goes." "I know," he said again. She held his gaze. "Are you still in this?" He stood at the door of a hotel where he cleaned floors for a living, holding a business card for a man he had never met, having spent the last 24 hours doing things that had nothing to do with his plan for his life. He thought about Karen's voice when she said, "I've been waiting for 2 months." He thought about Frank DeLuca, 22 years, gone in a manufactured moment, carrying whatever he'd seen with nowhere to take it. He thought about Cora's purple crayon horse. "Call Frank DeLuca," he said. "Tonight." He held the door until Avery was through it. Then he let it close behind her and walked back toward the housekeeping corridor to get his cart. He had a south wing floor to finish, and 40 minutes was probably already 35 and there was still work to do. Frank DeLuca answered on the fourth ring. Avery had called from the car, parked 2 blocks from the Ravenshire, on a side street where the streetlights had that particular orange quality that made everything look slightly unreal. She had not planned what she was going to say. She rarely planned what she was going to say on calls that mattered. Scripts made her sound like she was reading, and people heard that. "Mr. DeLuca," she said when he picked up. "My name is Avery Collins. I'm the CEO of a technology company called Ardent Systems. I got your number from a woman named Karen at the Ravenshire Grand." A long pause. Long enough that she thought he might hang up. "Karen gave you my number," he said. His voice was rougher than she had expected. The voice of a man somewhere past 60 who had smoked for a while and stopped and still carried the evidence of it. "She did," Avery said. "Mr. DeLuca, I think you know some things about what's happening at that hotel, and I think I can help you do something about it, but I need to understand what you found first." Another pause, shorter this time. "Karen said you were someone worth talking to?" "She gave me your card," Avery said. "She's been carrying it for 2 months." She heard him breathe, the sound of a television in the background, faint. Someone else in the house. A voice, then quiet. "Hang on," he said, and she heard him move, a door closing, the television receding. "Okay, where do you want to start?" "Tell me what you saw," she said. Frank DeLuca had worked at Ravenshire Grand for 22 years. He had started as a bellman, moved to guest services, spent the last 8 years as the hotel's facilities coordinator, the person responsible for managing vendor contracts, maintenance schedules, and supply agreements. It was unglamorous work, and he had been good at it, and for most of those 22 years the hotel had operated in a way that made him reasonably proud to be part of it. That changed about 14 months ago, when Victor Hale arrived as the new general manager. "Victor came in with his own people," Frank said. "That happens. New management brings their team. That's normal. But he also started changing vendors, facilities vendors, cleaning supply contracts, maintenance providers. Within 6 months, half the vendors we'd worked with for years were gone, replaced by companies I'd never heard of." Connex Group, Avery said. A pause. Among others. Yeah. Connex picked up 3 of our major service contracts within 4 months of Victor arriving. Cleaning supplies, HVAC maintenance, security equipment. He paused. The pricing wasn't right. I've been doing vendor contracts for 8 years. I know what things should cost. Connex was billing us 30, sometimes 40% above market rate for standard services. Did you report that? I brought it to Victor directly, Frank said, and there was something in his voice when he said it. A flatness, the sound of a man recounting the moment a door closed on him. He told me the contracts had been reviewed at the corporate level and approved, told me to focus on my job and let finance handle the numbers. But you didn't drop it, Avery said. I went into the management office one evening to get a supply requisition form from the printer, Frank said. Victor wasn't there, but his desk had papers on it, not hotel papers. I recognized the Connex letterhead because I'd been dealing with their invoices for months. But there were other documents with them, financial statements, transfer records. I only saw them for about 30 seconds before I heard Victor coming back and I left. What did you do with what you saw? I went back the next evening when I knew the office would be empty, Frank said. Victor kept the documents in a folder in the second drawer. I took photos on my phone. A beat. I know that wasn't my property to photograph, but I knew what I was looking at was wrong. I could feel it. Where are the photos now? Avery asked. On my phone, same phone I had then, and I never uploaded them anywhere. I was scared to. After they fired me, I thought about going to the police, but I didn't know if what I had was enough or if they'd just say I was a disgruntled former employee making things up. Avery pressed 2 fingers against her jaw. Mr. DeLuca, what I'm about to say is going to sound abrupt, but I mean it seriously. Those photos may be exactly what's needed to stop something that's actively happening right now. Tonight. I need you to get them to my lawyer before tomorrow morning. Frank was quiet for a moment. What's happening right now? Someone has been stealing confidential business documents from hotel guests, Avery said. Documents connected to a corporate transaction worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Victor Hale is involved. The ownership structure connects back to the same people behind Connex. She paused. You lost your job because you found something they needed to keep buried. I'd like to help you make sure it doesn't stay buried. The silence on the other end was the particular silence of a man weighing things. The cost of staying quiet against the cost of speaking, calculated over 2 months of sitting in his daughter's house in New Jersey, watching the decision not get easier. Give me your lawyer's number, Frank said. She called Nathan after she hung up with Frank. He was still in the hotel. She could hear the ambient sound of it, the echo quality of a large interior space. Frank's sending photos to Daniel tonight, she said. Financial transfer records between Connex and an account that isn't the hotel's operating account. If it's what it looks like, it's a kickback structure. Victor was approving inflated contracts and getting a cut routed back through a shell. That's why he needed the hotel job, Nathan said, voice low. It wasn't about hotel management. It was about access to the vendor contracts. And I walked in with acquisition documents that, if leaked, could have derailed a deal that would have changed the vendor landscape at the target company, Avery said. Connex holds contracts there too. If my acquisition goes through, my team reviews all existing vendor arrangements. Connex would almost certainly be out. So derailing your deal protects their revenue, Nathan said. Not just personal grievance. This is about money. It's always about money, she said. Are you okay in there? I'm working, he said. Garrett hasn't come back to the floor. Victor's not in yet, or if he is, he hasn't come to this wing. A pause. Karen filed her incident report. I saw her do it before I came back to the South Wing. She sent a copy to the regional HR office and one to the corporate compliance email address. Blind copy. She's protecting herself, Avery said. She's protecting the record, Nathan said. There's a difference. Another pause. Drew, the security guard, he called me an hour ago. He said someone asked him about the footage from last night. Asked him if he'd made any copies. Avery went still. What did he say? He said no, Nathan said. He sounded scared. He's not wrong to be scared. Whoever asked him knows he was on duty when the footage was accessed. Nathan, if they know the footage exists, I heard you, he said. The copy Drew made is not in this building. That's all I'll say about it. She understood what that meant. He had taken it. or ensured it was somewhere they couldn't reach. She didn't ask for more detail. There was a quality to the way he handled information that was careful in a specific way, not secretive for its own sake, but deliberate, the way someone moved when they understood that some details were safer unspoken. "I'm going to Daniel's office first thing tomorrow," she said. "With everything. The footage, Frank's photos, Karen's incident report. Daniel thinks we can file with the DA's office directly given the financial fraud angle." "Before you do that," Nathan said, "I need to tell you something I found tonight." She waited. "There's a woman who works housekeeping on the north wing," he said. "Name is Bea Montoya. She's been here 11 years. We talk sometimes on shift. Not often, but sometimes. Tonight she came to find me. She said she needed to tell someone, and she'd been watching me for a few days trying to decide if I was the right person." Avery said nothing. "Bea has a nephew," Nathan said, 24 years old. He was doing IT contractor work for Meridian Capital Partners, the parent company, not just the hotel. He noticed some anomalies in the financial routing software about 3 months ago and reported it internally. Last month he was let go. Standard reduction in force language. Nathan paused. "He's been trying to reach the SEC since then. He has internal records. But he's 24 and scared and doesn't know how to make it stick." "What's his name?" Avery asked. "Marco Reyes," Nathan said. "He lives in the Bronx. Bea has his number." Avery sat in the dark car on the side street and thought about Frank DeLuca with his phone photos that he'd been carrying for 2 months. She thought about Karen with a business card in her blazer pocket. She thought about a 24-year-old kid in the Bronx with internal financial records and no roadmap for what to do with them. She thought about all the people who had seen something and carried it alone because they didn't know where to take it, or because the person they would have taken it to was the person doing the thing. "How many people has this touched?" she said. It wasn't really a question. "More than Victor planned for," Nathan said. "That's the problem with organized schemes. They require a lot of moving parts. Moving parts means a lot of people who see things." She heard something shift in the background on his end, the sound of a door, footsteps. "I have to go," Nathan said, and his voice dropped slightly. "Victor just came in." The line went quiet. "What?" Victor Hale walked through the hotel lobby at 6:58 p.m., 12 minutes earlier than his scheduled shift. Nathan knew this because he had positioned himself near the East Corridor junction with a clear sightline to the lobby, which was not where he usually was at that time of evening, but which was easy enough to explain if anyone asked. There was a supply closet at the junction that legitimately needed restocking. Victor was not alone. He had Garrett with him, and a third man Nathan hadn't seen before. Civilian clothes, not hotel staff, carrying a thin briefcase. The three of them moved through the lobby with the tight, deliberate pace of people with a specific destination in mind, and they went straight toward the management corridor without stopping at the front desk. Nathan moved the cart forward, restocked 2 things from the supply closet, and then pushed back toward the south wing at normal pace. He took a route that put him past the management corridor entrance, and as he passed it, he heard, faintly, through the closed door at the end of the corridor, voices. 3 of them. Too low to make out words, the kind of low that meant they weren't talking about hotel business. He kept moving. His phone buzzed. A text from a number he didn't recognize, which resolved into someone he hadn't heard from in 3 years. A message that read simply, "Walker. Heard your name come up somewhere it shouldn't. You okay?" The number was Dex Rutherford's. They had served together for 6 years, 2 different deployments, the kind of proximity that either built something solid or destroyed you. Dex had gone into private security consulting after leaving the service. He was careful about who he worked for and tended to know things. Nathan typed back, "Fine. Why did my name come up?" The response came quickly. Meridian Capital Partners ran a background check on a Nathan Walker, hotel employee, Ravenshire Grand, 2 days ago. "I have a contact at the firm they use." Nathan stopped walking. He stood in the middle of the south wing corridor and read the message again. They had run his background, which meant they had already identified him as a variable, which meant the intervention in the lobby 2 nights ago had been noticed and someone had decided to find out who he was. The question was what they had found. His military record was not sealed in the conventional sense. It existed, it was real, it showed 11 years of service and an honorable discharge. The specific nature of his work was classified, which meant a standard background check would show a gap. Years of service with no operational detail. To most people, that looked like administrative nothing. To someone who knew what they were looking at, it looked like exactly what it was. He didn't know which kind of person Victor Hale had access to. He typed back to Dex. What did they do with the results? Don't know. Just wanted you to know they looked. Nathan put the phone in his pocket. He stood in the corridor for a moment and thought through what this changed. It changed the shape of his exposure. It did not change the fundamental situation. Frank DeLuca's photos were with Daniel Cho. Karen's report was filed. The flash drive was out of the building. The evidentiary pieces that mattered were not in Nathan's possession and were not dependent on his safety to be useful. What it changed was the personal risk calculation. And Nathan had not been factoring personal risk into this because he had been operating, without fully acknowledging it, the way he used to operate, treating the mission as the primary thing and himself as a means to completing it. He had spent 4 years trying not to do that. It turned out 4 years was not quite long enough to fully unwire 11. He called Avery. They ran a background check on me, he said when she answered. 2 days ago. I just found out. A short silence. Meridian? They're people. They know I'm a factor. He paused. I need you to know that, because it changes what Victor might try tonight. Nathan. Her voice was measured, but something underneath it was not. What does your background check show? Military service, he said. 11 years. The specific work is classified. Depending on who interprets it, it either shows nothing interesting or it shows exactly the kind of experience I have. Which is what exactly? He had known this conversation was coming. He had known it since the lobby 2 nights ago when she had said you don't move like someone who only knows how to clean floors. He had given her the minimum version, Navy, for a long time, and she had let it sit. But minimum versions had a shelf life, and this one had just expired. SEAL teams, he said. 11 years. I did 2 operational deployments, some other work that I'm not going to get into. I got out 4 years ago. He paused. I have a daughter. She was 3 when I left. I wanted to be somewhere she could find me every day when she came home from school. The silence on the other end was not the silence of someone processing information. It was the silence of someone being careful about how they received something. Okay, Avery said quietly. I didn't tell you before because it's not something I lead with, he said. I'm not that person anymore, or I'm trying not to be. I'm not asking you to be that person, she said. I know, he said, but Victor might be trying to figure out how much of a problem I am. If someone in his network knows how to read a military service record, they know I'm more of a problem than a janitor with an opinion. What do we do? She asked. Nothing different, he said. The position we're in is actually decent. The evidence is out of the building. Karen's report is filed. Tomorrow morning you walk into Daniel's office, and this becomes a legal process. He leaned against the corridor wall. Victor's problem tonight is that he doesn't know what we have. He knows we've been in the conference room. He knows footage was accessed. He knows Karen filed something, but he doesn't know the scope. People who don't know the scope of their exposure make bad decisions, Avery said. Yes, Nathan said. They do. Is that why you're still in the building? She asked. You're waiting to see what he does. Nathan said nothing. Nathan. I want to know who the third man is, he said. The one with the briefcase who came in with Victor and Garrett. He's not hotel staff. He's not a guest. And whatever they're discussing in that management corridor, he's central to it. He heard Avery exhale. Not frustrated, more like someone adjusting to a situation they had decided to stop fighting. Be careful, she said. I'm always careful, he said. I doubt that very much, she said. But okay. He found out about the third man at 8:45, when Bea Montoya appeared around the corner of the north wing with her housekeeping cart and a look that meant she had something. Bea was 61, had worked at Ravenshire for 11 years, and had the compact, self-contained quality of a woman who had long since stopped being surprised by the behavior of people with more money and power than sense. She had dark eyes that missed very little and a way of moving through a space that made her seem like part of the architecture. The man with Victor, she said, without preamble. She kept her voice low and her hands moving, straightening towels on her cart as she spoke. Name is Elliot Voss. He's a lawyer. I heard his name when I was changing the linen in the conference suite. They used the executive conference suite tonight, not the management office. I could hear them through the supply door. It connects. What did you hear? Nathan said. Not everything, but the name Voss and the word injunction. She paused. And your name? They said Nathan Walker, and they said former military, and something about it being manageable. Nathan was quiet for a moment. Anything else? They said the filing window closes at the end of business tomorrow. She looked at him directly. I don't know what that means, but they sounded like it was urgent. Nathan thought about it. A filing window closing at the end of business tomorrow. An injunction. If Meridian Capital Partners was moving to file a legal injunction against Avery, against her acquisition, based on information from the stolen documents, they would need to file before the acquisition moved to its next formal phase. And the next phase was a regulatory submission that Daniel had mentioned was scheduled for tomorrow afternoon. If they filed first, with detailed knowledge of the acquisition terms, knowledge that could only have come from the stolen documents, they could potentially delay the deal long enough to cause Hargrove to reconsider, or at minimum force a costly legal fight during the most sensitive window. They were not waiting anymore. They were moving. He called Avery. Victor has a lawyer with him, Nathan said. Elliot Voss. They're preparing to file an injunction. Tomorrow, before end of business. He gave her everything B had said. The silence on the other end lasted about 4 seconds. He could almost hear her thinking. They're going to use the stolen documents as the basis, she said. Claim they have evidence of irregularities in the acquisition structure, which is fabricated, but if it's detailed enough, a judge could grant a temporary hold. She paused. Daniel needs to know this tonight, right now. Call him, Nathan said. I'm calling him, she said. Nathan, if they're filing tomorrow, they need to have the documents in hand to build the injunction motion, which means the documents are somewhere accessible to Voss tonight. Nathan looked down the corridor, thought about the executive conference suite and the supply door that connected to it. You think they're still in the building? If Voss is drafting tonight, he needs the physical papers as reference. He wouldn't take them to his office yet. Too risky to move sensitive materials twice. They're in the hotel. That's a reasonable assessment, Nathan said. Nathan. A pause. I'm not asking you to do anything with that information. The legal path is what matters. I know, he said. Go call Daniel. He stood in the corridor after she hung up. Down the hall, Bea was pushing her cart toward the elevator, her movements unhurried, ordinary. She caught his eye once before she rounded the corner and gave him a small nod, the kind that meant, I've done what I can, the rest is yours. He thought about the supply door that connected to the executive conference suite. He thought about the layout of the suite. He had cleaned it enough times to know it well. One main room, a small connecting anteroom, a supply access on the north wall that hotel maintenance used during events. He thought about what it would mean to go in there, what it would cost. He had told himself 4 years ago that he was done making decisions that put the mission above the life he was building. He had meant it. He still meant it. And yet here he was again, standing in a corridor at 9 in the evening, running the calculation. The difference. And he tried to be honest with himself about whether this was a real difference or just a reason, was that this time the mission and the life he was building were not in opposition. If he walked away tonight and let Victor's lawyer file that injunction with stolen documents, the people who got hurt were not abstractions. They were Karen, who had carried a business card for 2 months. They were Frank DeLuca, fired after 22 years for finding something he shouldn't have. They were B.A., who had just told him his name was being discussed as a manageable problem. They were a 24-year-old in the Bronx who had tried to do the right thing and lost his job for it. And they were Avery Collins, who had stood alone in a lobby while people laughed quietly around her and had not broken. He started walking toward the north wing. The supply access door was unlocked, as it usually was during evening hours when the suite was in use. He did not open it. He stood near it and listened. 3 voices. He picked out Victor. He knew Victor's cadence well enough now. Garrett, lower. And a third voice, precise and quick, the voice of a man accustomed to courtrooms. Elliot Voss. He could not hear words clearly, but he could hear the rhythm of the conversation, and after a few minutes he heard the sound he was listening for. The specific sound of papers being moved, sorted, stacked. Not digital files, physical papers. He took his phone out, opened the voice memo app, and he held it close to the seam of the supply door for 4 minutes and 17 seconds. He didn't get words. The audio quality through the door would be too poor for that, but he got duration. He got Victor's voice and the third man's voice in the same room at the same time. He got the sound of papers, and he got, at the 2-minute mark, something that resolved clearly enough through the door to be unmistakable. Victor saying a name. Ardent Systems. That was Avery's company, named by a hotel general manager in a private meeting with a lawyer at 9 p.m. in the context of document preparation. He texted the memo to Daniel Cho's number, which Avery had sent him earlier. Then he texted, voice memo, Nathan Walker. From outside executive conference suite this evening, Victor Hale, an unknown third party. Quality is poor, but his voice is identifiable. Timestamp intact. Then he walked back to the south wing and resumed his shift. He finished the south corridor. Did the elevator lobbies on 3 and 4, restocked the supply cart, clocked out at 11:10, 6 minutes late, which happens sometimes. He drove home through streets that were mostly quiet, parked, went upstairs. Mrs. Pacheco was on the couch again, television on, asleep. He turned it down, checked on Cora. She had moved again, entirely sideways now, feet against the wall, which was a new development. He didn't move her. He stood in the doorway and let the ordinary darkness of her room settle around him. His phone buzzed. Avery. Daniel received the memo. He says it's enough to request an emergency hearing in the morning to preempt any injunction filing. Combined with Frank's photos and Karen's report, he says we're in a strong position. He read it twice. Then he typed back, good. A pause. Then, how are you? It was a simple question, the kind people asked each other all the time. He was not used to it landing the way it did, which said something about the last 4 years that he wasn't ready to examine closely. He typed, I'm okay. Go sleep. Her response came after a moment. You too. He set the phone down on the kitchen counter, looked at the green horse drawing, still there from this morning. Had it only been this morning? It felt like 3 days had been compressed into one. He had not planned any of this. He had planned a quiet night, a south wing floor, home by midnight. Instead, he had stood outside a door listening to a man build a case against a woman who had done nothing wrong and had done something about it. Not dramatically, not heroically, just something. A voice memo. A text. A small piece of something that might matter in the morning. He got a glass of water, stood at the sink in the kitchen dark. In the morning, things would either get cleaner or get harder. He had been around long enough to know that those were usually the only two options, and sometimes they were both true at the same time. He drank the water, went to bed. Daniel Cho filed the emergency motion at 7:43 in the morning. He had been up since 2 a.m., which Avery knew because he had sent her 3 separate emails between 2 and 4, each one methodical and precise, the kind of work product that came from a man who did his best thinking when the rest of the world was asleep and couldn't interrupt him. By the time she arrived at his office at 7, he had the motion drafted, the supporting evidence organized, and a cup of coffee that had gone cold while he was working and that he drank anyway without seeming to notice. The voice memo alone wouldn't be enough, he said, spreading papers across his desk. But the voice memo combined with the security footage, combined with Frank DeLuca's photographs, combined with Karen's formal incident report, what we have is a documented pattern, not an isolated incident, a coordinated scheme. He looked up at her. The judge handling emergency commercial matters this morning is Patricia Sung. She is not a patient woman, and she has a particular dislike for corporate actors who use stolen materials as the basis for legal action. This is a good draw for us. When will we know? Avery asked. Whether our motion is granted. Before noon, most likely. Whether Meridian attempted to file first. He glanced at his watch. We'll know within the hour. My contact at the courthouse will flag it when filing's open. Avery sat in the chair across from his desk. She had slept 4 hours, which was not enough and was also more than she had expected. She had a meeting with her CFO at 10 that she had not yet decided whether to cancel or keep, a call with Richard Hargrove's office at 11 that she definitely needed to keep. And somewhere underneath both of those, a low, persistent awareness of Nathan Walker and a voice memo recorded outside a supply door at 9 in the evening by a man who cleaned hotel floors and had told her, without drama, that he used to be a Navy SEAL. She was still working out what to do with that. not the information. The information made sense of things she had already half known. What she was still working out was the feeling that accompanied it, which was harder to categorize and which she kept setting aside to deal with the immediate things and which kept coming back anyway. Avery, Daniel said. She looked at him. We're going to be okay, he said. I don't say that lightly. I know you don't, she said. At 8:17, his contact at the courthouse called. Meridian Capital Partners, through their attorney Elliot Voss, had filed a motion at 8:02 a.m. seeking a temporary injunction against the Ardent Systems acquisition on the grounds of undisclosed material irregularities. The motion cited specific details of the acquisition structure that were not in any public document. They used it, Avery said. They used it, Daniel confirmed, which is exactly what we needed them to do. He was already typing. They just put stolen proprietary information into a legal filing, under their own names. Nathan was braiding Cora's hair when his phone rang. He was not good at braiding. He had watched tutorial videos. He had practiced on a doll that Cora had donated to the cause, with the patient condescension of a 7-year-old who understood that adults needed help with certain things. He had gotten better. But Cora had very specific opinions about tightness and symmetry, and the opinions were delivered in real time with the candor of someone who had not yet learned to soften feedback. That side's too loose, Cora said. I know, Nathan said. It's going to fall out by lunch. I know, he said. Hold still. His phone rang on the bathroom counter. He glanced at it, Avery, and let it go to voicemail, finished the braid to Cora's provisional satisfaction, and called back while Cora ate cereal and argued with the cartoon on the kitchen television. They filed, Avery said when he picked up. 8 a.m. And they used the acquisition details from the stolen documents. Daniel's counter motion is already in. So they incriminated themselves, Nathan said. In a federal court filing, Avery said. Yes. A pause. How are you? I'm watching my daughter eat cereal and tell a cartoon it's wrong, he said. A small sound on her end. Not quite a laugh, but close. That sounds like a good morning. Most mornings are, if you set them up right, he said. He looked at Cora, who had strong opinions about the cartoon and was not keeping them to herself. What happens now? Daniel argues the emergency motion. The stolen documents get flagged to the court as the basis for Meridian's filing, which triggers a separate fraud inquiry. The injunction attempt collapses. She paused. And then it gets referred to the DA's office, which is where Frank's photographs and Karen's report become the main event. The kickback structure, the vendor fraud, the document theft, all of it. Victor, Nathan said, and Garrett, and probably people above Victor in the Meridian structure, depending on how far the financial records go. She was quiet for a moment. Marco Reyes, Bia's nephew, Daniel's investigator, called him last night. He has 3 months of internal financial routing records from Meridian Systems. He's been sitting on them in a folder on his laptop since they fired him, waiting for someone to tell him they were worth something. Nathan thought about a 24-year-old kid with a folder of evidence and no map for what to do with it. Someone should have told him sooner, he said. Yes, Avery said. Someone should have. The cartoon on the television made a sound of catastrophic misfortune, and Cora said with satisfaction, I told you, to no one in particular. Nathan watched her for a moment. I have to take her to school, he said. Go, Avery said. I'll call you when there's news. He drove Cora to school, walked her to the door because she still let him do that, and stood on the sidewalk in the November cold for a moment after she disappeared inside. The morning was gray and ordinary, and his breath made small clouds in front of him. Down the street, a bodega was opening its gate. A man was walking a very old dog at the dog's own pace. The city was doing what cities did, which was continue regardless. He drove home, changed out of the school-run clothes, made coffee, sat at the kitchen table with his phone face up, and waited. He was not good at waiting that had no physical component. In the field, waiting had always been active. There were things to monitor, angles to track, the constant low-level processing of environmental information. Waiting in a kitchen was a different skill, and he had never fully developed it. He looked at Cora's green horse on the refrigerator door. She had added something to it since he last looked. A small figure next to the horse. Stick arms and stick legs and a circle head with what appeared to be a mop or possibly a broom in one hand. He stared at it for a moment. She had drawn him into the picture. He had not seen her do it. She must have done it sometime in the last few days while he was at work or distracted, slipped it back onto the refrigerator without saying anything. Just added him there, standing next to her impossible green horse, as though it were the most natural thing in the world to put him in the frame. He sat with that for a while. The coffee went slightly cold. Judge Patricia Sung granted the emergency counter-motion at 11:18 a.m. Daniel called Avery with the news in a voice that was controlled and professional and could not entirely conceal that he was deeply pleased. The injunction attempt by Meridian Capital Partners was dismissed with prejudice. The court flagged the use of proprietary materials in the original filing for referral to the Commercial Fraud Division. Elliot Voss, the attorney who had filed on Meridian's behalf, had already issued a statement through his firm that he had not been informed by his client that the materials were improperly obtained, which was the kind of statement lawyers issued when they were beginning to calculate their own exposure. "It's done?" Avery asked. "The injunction is done," Daniel said. "The acquisition proceeds on the original timeline. The regulatory submission goes in this afternoon as planned." A pause. "The criminal referral is a separate process, and it will take longer. But the financial records Marco Reyes provided are significant. My investigator says they show a pattern of fraudulent billing across 6 properties in the Meridian portfolio, not just Ravenshire. This is not a small matter." Avery was standing at her office window when she took the call. Her office was on the 14th floor, and on a clear day she could see a long way. Today was not a clear day. The November sky was thick and low, and the buildings disappeared into it a few blocks out. She stood there looking at the gray middle distance and felt something inside her chest that was not triumph, but was adjacent to it. Something quieter. She had built her company over 8 years. She had made decisions at 2 in the morning with bad information and no safety net. She had sat across from people who assumed she would fail and had chosen to find that motivating rather than devastating most of the time. She had believed, for most of those 8 years, that the structure of success was fundamentally solitary, that you built walls strong enough and smart enough, and eventually the walls were sufficient. What the last 3 days had dismantled, quietly and completely, was that particular belief. She called Nathan. "It's done," she said. "The motion was granted. The acquisition is clear." A pause on his end. "Good," he said. "Victor?" he asked. "The criminal referral is in. It'll move from here." She looked out the window. "Daniel says it goes beyond Victor. The fraud touches multiple Meridian properties. There are going to be a lot of people answering questions they didn't expect to answer." "Frank DeLuca," Nathan said. "Daniel is already talking to him about the wrongful termination claim," Avery said. "Given the evidence of the fraud Victor was running, the pretextual firing is well documented. Frank will be okay." A pause. "Karen filed a whistleblower protection notice this morning on Daniel's advice. She's protected." "And Bea?" "Bea Montoya provided information that helped build the case," Avery said. "Daniel says her cooperation will be noted formally. If she wants it, there's a path to a formal commendation in the regulatory proceeding." "She won't care about a commendation," Nathan said. "I know," Avery said, "but it's there if she wants it." She turned away from the window. "Nathan, I need to ask you something." "Okay," he said. "What you did over the past 3 days, the camera footage, the supply door, the voice memo, the routes through the building, none of that was your responsibility. I called you at midnight 2 nights ago because I had nowhere else to turn, and you were the only person who had been straight with me all evening. You could have said no. You would have figured it out," he said. "Maybe," she said, "slower, with worse odds." She paused. "I'm trying to say thank you in a way that doesn't sound like I'm reducing what you did to a service." A short silence. "You don't need to make it complicated," Nathan said. "You would have done the same." "I don't know that I would have," she said honestly. "I've been thinking about it. I've spent a long time believing that competence was the same as self-sufficiency, that if you were good enough at what you did, you didn't need to let people in." She stopped. "You let me in. At midnight, on a Tuesday, when you had a daughter at home and a life you'd built deliberately, and no reason at all to get involved." Nathan was quiet on the other end. Outside his window, or wherever he was, she could hear wind. Faint, like he was near a door or a window that wasn't fully closed. "I've been thinking about that too," he said finally. "Why I picked up, why I went back." He paused. Honest answer is I don't know if I made a clean decision. I think I just saw the thing that was happening and couldn't make myself walk away from it. That's not virtue. That's just how I'm wired. I think those are sometimes the same thing, she said. Another silence, different from the ones before it. Easier, somehow. How's your daughter? Avery asked. She told a cartoon it was wrong this morning, he said. And she was right. 3 weeks later, Victor Hale was arrested at his residence at 6:15 in the morning. The charges included conspiracy to commit corporate fraud, theft of proprietary business information, and breach of fiduciary duty in his role as a hotel manager. Garrett, whose full name was Garrett Sims and who had been placed at Ravenshire by a Meridian-connected security firm, was picked up the same morning. Elliot Voss, the attorney, reached a cooperation agreement with prosecutors within 48 hours, which was the kind of speed that told you how fast a man could move when his own exposure became clear. The Ardent Systems acquisition closed on schedule. Richard Hargrove issued a brief public statement describing the closing as a significant milestone for both companies. It was the kind of statement that said nothing and meant everything, the language of two parties who had come through difficulty and chosen not to make a display of it. Frank DeLuca's wrongful termination case settled 6 weeks after the criminal referral. He didn't get his old job back. He had not wanted it back, he told Daniel, which Daniel relayed to Avery with a tone that suggested he respected this. What Frank got was a settlement that acknowledged what had been done to him, and a letter of formal commendation entered into the regulatory record that stated, without ambiguity, that his actions in documenting financial irregularities had been an act of integrity. He called Avery once, after the settlement. She answered on the first ring. I just wanted to say, Frank said, and then stopped. She heard him working through whatever he had prepared. I carried that thing for 2 months, the photos. Didn't know if they mattered, didn't know if it was worth it. It was worth it, Avery said. Karen told me you were the right person, he said. She was right about that. Karen's right about most things, Avery said. She meant it. Karen had returned to her shift supervisor role quietly and without fanfare, and had declined an interview request from a business publication that had picked up fragments of the story. She had sent Avery a single email after the criminal referral was announced, 3 sentences long. I'm glad it worked out. Thank you for taking it seriously. Please don't send flowers. Avery had not sent flowers. She had made a donation to a hospitality workers advocacy organization instead, in Karen's name, and had not told Karen until it was done. Marco Reyes was 24 years old and had done the thing that people in their 20s were not supposed to be equipped to do. He had seen something wrong inside a powerful organization and had tried to report it even when the organization pushed back. He had lost his job for it. He had carried evidence for 3 months, not knowing if anyone would ever care. Avery called him herself. He sounded surprised that it was her. She had expected that. Young people who did the right thing and got punished for it were generally not accustomed to the phone ringing with good news. What you had, she said, and what you did with it, that mattered. I want you to know that directly. I didn't really do anything, he said. I just held on to it. Holding on to it was the thing, she said. Don't underestimate that. There was a silence on the other end. Are they actually going to, is something actually going to happen to those people? Yes, she said. Something is actually going to happen to those people. She heard him exhale. Not relief exactly, more like something he had been holding in his chest for 3 months that was just now being allowed to put itself down. She had a call with her CFO after she hung up, and a board update to draft, and 17 other things on the list that was always running in the back of her mind, the constant low hum of a company in motion. She got to all of them, but she thought about Marco Reyes for most of the rest of that day. About what it cost to do the right thing when you were young and didn't have the armor for it yet. About how many other Marco Reyeses were sitting somewhere with folders on their laptops, waiting for someone to tell them it was worth something. She started thinking about what a system for that would look like. Not a hotline. Hotlines went nowhere. Something with actual teeth. She filed the thought away and kept working. Bachag. She met Nathan for coffee on a Thursday afternoon in December. It was a place he had suggested, a diner 6 blocks from his apartment, the kind with laminate countertops and a coffee machine that had been running since the 90s, and a waitress named Gloria, who called everyone Han without irony. Avery arrived in her work clothes, laptop bag over her shoulder, 4 minutes late because of a call that had run over, and found Nathan already there in a booth by the window with 2 cups of coffee already poured. He looked different outside the hotel. Not dramatically. He was wearing the same kind of clothes he would have worn anywhere, nothing careful about it. But he was sitting with a looseness that she hadn't seen in the hotel corridors, shoulders less set. The constant low-level environmental monitoring that she had noticed in him dimmed slightly by the ordinary comfort of a place he knew. "You look like you belong here," she said, sliding in across from him. "I do belong here," he said. "Gloria makes the best pie in this part of the city, and she doesn't charge me for the coffee refills." "Gloria's playing favorites," Avery said. "Gloria plays favorites with everyone," he said. "That's her whole system." Gloria appeared, confirmed that the apple pie was fresh, and left them with it. They talked for a while about the practical aftermath, the case timeline, the regulatory proceedings, the updates on Frank and Karen and Marco. Nathan had spoken to Bea Montoya twice since everything broke. She was still working at Ravenshire, which had come under new interim management from the hotel brand's corporate office, while the ownership situation was being sorted out. Bea had told Nathan she was fine, that the new interim manager was a decent person, and that she had started taking her lunch breaks outside when the weather allowed because she felt like it now. "She feels like it now," Avery said. "That was the exact phrasing," Nathan said. They sat with that for a moment. "I want to ask you something," Avery said, "and you don't have to answer in any particular way. I'm not asking it as a business proposal." He waited. "My company has a need for someone who understands physical security, threat assessment, and operational risk. We've grown fast enough that the gaps are starting to show." She wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. "I've thought about how to ask you this in a way that doesn't come across as, I don't know, transactional, like I'm just trying to fit what you did into a job description and pay you for it." "How does it come across?" he asked. "Like I'm trying to find an excuse to keep you in the picture," she said. "Because you're good at what you do and because you're someone I trust, and those two things together are rarer than they should be." Nathan looked at his coffee. The diner had the particular warmth of places that had been the same temperature for 20 years, regardless of what happened outside. Through the window, December was doing what December did. Gray sky, bare trees, people moving fast with their hands in their pockets. "What would the job actually look like?" he said. "Honestly, I'd need to build it around you," she said. "I don't want a figurehead. I want someone who walks the floors, knows the people, notices things before they become problems." She paused. "Someone who doesn't treat the frontline employees like furniture." "That's a low bar," he said. "You'd be shocked," she said. He was quiet for a moment. She didn't rush it. She had learned, over the past few weeks, that Nathan Walker processed things at his own pace, and that the pace was deliberate rather than slow, and that pushing it produced nothing useful. "I have conditions," he said. "Tell me," she said. "Cora's school is 2 miles from the apartment. I need to be there for drop-off and pick up 3 days a week minimum. That's not flexible." "Not flexible," she confirmed. "I don't want an office," he said. "I don't work well in offices. I need to be moving." "I'll have facilities pull a station near the operations floor," she said. "Somewhere you can drop a bag and keep going." "And I want to keep talking to frontline staff," he said. "Not as surveillance. Just, people should be able to talk to me if something's wrong. That should be known." She looked at him. "Nathan, that is literally the job I'm describing." He picked up his coffee, drank some of it, set it down. "Yeah," he said. "Okay." It was not a grand moment. There was no ceremony to it. Outside, December traffic moved in its December way. Gloria refilled their cups without being asked. The pie was, as advertised, very good. Avery thought about the lobby of the Ravenshire Grand, the marble floors and the frozen waterfall chandeliers, and the careful choreography of a place designed to make certain people feel at home and other people feel like they were in the wrong room. She thought about standing alone in that lobby with a confirmation number in her hand and the specific weight of being looked through by people who had decided she wasn't worth looking at. She thought about a cleaning cart coming around the corner. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "You keep asking if you can ask me things," Nathan said. "You can just ask." "In the lobby," she said, "when you stepped in, you said respect wasn't something you earned from money or status, that it was something every person deserved." She paused. "Do you actually believe that? Or was it the right thing to say in the moment? Nathan was quiet for a moment. I believe it, he said. It's not complicated. People treat other people like they're less than what they are, usually because it makes something easier for them. Some transaction, some piece of power they want to hold on to. And the people on the receiving end of it carry it, even when they're tough, even when they're used to it. He looked at her directly. You were carrying it that night. I could see it. She didn't answer immediately. She had spent a lot of years building the kind of composure that didn't show those things. She had believed, for most of that time, that not showing them meant not having them. I was, she said. Everyone does, he said. That's not a weakness, it's just true. She looked out the window for a moment. The December street was gray and unhurried, people moving through their ordinary days with whatever they were carrying, all of them carrying something. That was the thing you forgot when you got too far inside your own structure. That everyone around you was navigating the same basic human difficulty of being a person in a world that was frequently indifferent to that fact. You know what I've been thinking about? She said. Tell me, he said. All the people in that hotel who had been seeing things for months and had nowhere to take them. Karen with her business card, Frank with his photos, Bea watching the whole thing, Marco Reyes with his folder. She turned back to face him. They were all waiting for the same thing, not a hero, not someone to ride in and fix it, just someone to take it seriously, someone to treat what they knew as worth something. People don't need saving as often as they need someone to listen, Nathan said. That's it exactly, she said. And I've been running a company for 8 years, and I think I've been pretty good at the operational parts of that. The strategy, the growth, the transactions. But I'm not sure I've been great at the listening part. The part where you slow down enough to notice who's standing in the hallway. Nathan looked at her with an expression she was learning to read. Not quite a smile, something drier than that. You noticed the man with the newspaper, he said. 4 hours later, in a hotel room, you went back and figured out what was wrong about it. That's not the same. It's exactly the same, he said. You notice things. You're just used to noticing at a certain altitude. 30,000-foot decisions. You've been doing it so long the closer stuff got blurry. He picked up his cup. Altitude's not bad, but you need someone on the ground too. Is that your pitch for the job? She said. I already took the job, he said. That was just an observation. She laughed. It was a real one. Not the managed professional version she had become accustomed to deploying in meetings. It surprised her slightly, the way real laughter sometimes did when it arrived without warning. Gloria appeared with the check and told them they were welcome to stay as long as they liked, because it was a slow Thursday and she was going to watch her show in the back regardless. They stayed another 40 minutes. They talked about Cora's evolving opinions on the second-grade social order. They talked about what Avery was thinking regarding the Marco Reyes problem. How to build something that didn't require people to get lucky with who they called at midnight. Nathan had thoughts about it that were practical and specific, the way his thoughts tended to be. And she took notes on her phone while he talked because she had learned to do that when people who knew what they were saying said it. When they finally left, the December air hit cold and immediate. They stood on the sidewalk in front of the diner and the city moved around them. And Avery thought about how 3 weeks ago she had walked into a hotel lobby and been made to feel invisible, and how the solution to that had not come from any of the places she would have thought to look. It had come from a man pushing a cleaning cart who had decided that what he saw was worth responding to. Not because it was his job, not because he had something to gain. Just because he had been taught by 11 years of watching what happened when people were left behind, that walking past the thing you noticed was a kind of choice. And he had decided, at some point that he couldn't entirely explain, that it wasn't the choice he wanted to keep making. Thank you, she said, for the third time since they had met, in the same direct way she had said it the first time in the hotel corridor. You already said that, Nathan said. It keeps being true, she said. He nodded once, put his hands in his jacket pockets. Monday, he said. What time? 9, she said. Operations floor. I'll have someone meet you. No, he said. I'll find my own way around. She started to say something, then stopped. Of course he would. That was the whole point. She watched him walk down the street in the direction of the school pickup. It was almost 3, she realized, moving with that same unhurried, observant pace that she had first noticed in a marble corridor 11 days ago. Already looking around him, already noticing what was there. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment after he turned the corner, her laptop bag on her shoulder and the cold working through her coat, and she thought about what it meant to be seen by someone who had no reason to look. It meant something. She had not expected it to mean as much as it did, and she was still in the early stages of being honest with herself about that. But she had spent 8 years building a company by being honest about the things that were true, even when the truth was inconvenient or complicated or arrived without warning at midnight on a Tuesday. This was true. She started walking back toward the office. The city went on around her, ordinary and complicated and full of people carrying things nobody else could see. And she walked through it feeling, for the first time in a long time, like someone who had been reminded that the walls she had built were not the whole story. They were a good beginning, but the people on the other side of them were the part that mattered. That was the thing Nathan Walker had known all along, standing in the hallway with his cleaning cart, watching a woman who controlled a $1 billion company stand alone and deciding, without making a production of it, that being the kind of person who walked past was not who he intended to be. It was a small decision, the kind that looked like nothing from the outside, the kind that changed everything.